Alright, so as I was introduced, my name is Devin Kowalik. I am a psychologist here in Bakersfield. I'm originally from Fresno, where I completed my bachelor's degree in psychology and my PhD in clinical forensic psychology. So a lot of my background has been in much more severe populations. So with my graduate work, most people in most psychology graduate programs tend to work with they work with outpatient, they work with people who just come in, they work with people who are going through kind of just general problems. However, a lot of my work has been with juvenile hall, been with prison systems, been with police officers, and been with the military. So with my training in particular, we work with a lot of the most severe individuals. However, this sort of transition in my internship year and between 2014 and 2018, I spent my time working full-time with basically a small private practice where we did just a lot of general mental health services. I was called in as asked to speak today on kind of anxiety and depression and suicide, mental health and medication, and then why do people go to mental health services. So currently, I work with this in some degree. Currently, I am working with a small program up at the Laredo Pretrial Facility where we take people who are not able to go through court, so they've been accused of a crime, they're mentally ill, they can't stand a trial, they come to us, we get them better hopefully, and then send them back to court. So we see a lot of the people who are in really tough spots. However, that's aside, we're not going to talk about much of that today, but that might come up every so often. Anxiety and depression is one of the first things that I was asked to speak about. So anxiety manifests a lot of times as feelings of unease, feeling like you may have forgotten something, feeling like something is just off. Most people usually don't even know that they fully have an anxiety issue or an anxiety disorder until it's sort of pointed out that, hey, not everybody, goes over this 15 times or goes over this 10 times or constantly has to plan things out before they do something. It's that they just do those things. So anxiety is this really kind of nefarious, this is really underhanded way of sort of undermining you. You spend so much time and so much energy and so much concern planning on and counter planning and contingency planning and what if this goes wrong and what if this goes right and how do we get to here? So much time and energy is invested in this when really if you had just gone and done that thing or gone and dealt with whatever that issue was, would have taken you much less time. And then that doesn't even take into account the draining factor, just the stress and the constant having to think and plan and worry about things that might happen, that could happen, that ought to happen. So anxiety really plays a big part in this very underlying way. It's not this like, oh, somebody's going to very obviously see that I'm anxious and I'm uncomfortable. This might just be how you are every day, and it might not be serving you as it might have in the past. So in the past, a lot of this anxiety comes from being trained to think like this. I'm going to think like this. I'm going to plan this out so that this doesn't go wrong in the future, or I can stop this from happening again. But in that situation, it might have been effective, but you're no longer in that situation. You're no longer in that place where you have to plan those things out, or you might not have had the control that you did before. Everybody here is an adult. Everybody here has the authority and the power over their own lives to kind of choose how things go, and you can make those decisions. So we'll get to anxiety and how that relates to kind of medications and a lot of issues with that. Depression is an odd disorder because it is commonly referred to in the psych field as the common cold of mental illness. Most people will experience some form of depression in their life. Most of the time, depression manifests as that feeling of sadness, feeling of guilt, feeling of just being tired all the time. However, there is a small group of people who experience this as anxiety, who experience it as agitation, who experience it as frustration. Suddenly they just have a shorter temper, they're just not able to deal with things as much. And this is a form of depression. Their body is tired, their body feels down, they're literally and figuratively depressed. And so they're finding ways to try to deal with this because they just don't have the tolerance anymore. I'd often refer to it as either the pancake problem or the thin skin problem. Is once your resources, once your internal resources are kind of drained, similar to like you have a raw piece of skin, somebody scraped you. What happens when you get scraped again on that same spot? Does it hurt just as much? Or does it hurt worse? It hurts worse. And every time you keep scraping it, it might not even hurt anymore. It just feels bad. It just feels unpleasant. And that can be how depression comes out. So that's sort of the thin skin, the raw skin model. The pancake model is basically 1 pancake is fine. 3 pancakes is getting to be a lot. But if we start doing 5, 10, 15, that's a lot of pancakes. And suddenly where we have each little thing on its own, it started to build up over time. And so sure, you have this and you have this, but you also have this, 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 and this, and this. And by the end of the day, you're just done. You're just beat by all of these things going on. So work and school and life and friends and all of these other unpleasant things going on, they just wear you out. Each one of these things on their own, not a big deal. But all together, all stacked up, that's too much. And so finding ways to reduce this, finding ways to set aside these things, finding ways to deal with them in a way that's effective and efficient so that you can deal with everything else that comes along. Because if you have this much stress going on and then we add another thing on top of that, you might not be able to deal with that. And that's when we start to see a lot of this really unhealthy behavior come out. And you know, everybody, and a lot of the social services talk about, you know, oh, there's drugs and alcohol and other stuff, but everybody has healthy ways and unhealthy ways of dealing with things. Everybody has good and bad habits, and when we're stressed out, we tend to rely a lot more on those bad habits. We tend to rely a lot more on those things that we know are not good for us, but they're nice in that moment. We hang out with the friends that we know are not going to be very helpful for us. We start wasting more and more time online. We stop, you know, eating well, and we start just going to the fast food places because it's easy, it's cheap, and it's a nice meal. And we know that if we had more time, if we had more energy, if we didn't have to deal with all of these other 15 things going on, we would be doing better with that. So anxiety and depression sort of just quickly run through. Suicide, and I'd also like to throw into this self-injurious behaviors. So why do people cut? Why do people hurt themselves? Why do people pull their hair? Why do people burn themselves?
To feel pain?
Why would you want to feel pain? You're correct. You're 100% correct.
To distract from the other pain that you're having.
It's distracting from the other pain. Because of everybody here, would you rather have emotional pain or physical pain? Emotional pain or physical pain?
I don't know.
Obviously,
probably physical because it goes away. Yeah.
Nobody wants either. If you had to pick the third option of neither, you'd want that. But if you had to pick, gun to your head, physical pain or emotional pain, which would you rather have?
Physical.
Physical pain or emotional?
Physical pain.
Physical pain or emotional?
Physical.
You in the back. Physical pain or emotional pain?
Physical.
It's easier to deal with. It's easier and it's more comfortable to deal with because that emotional pain lingers. So why do people self-harm? Why do people cut? Why do people burn? Why do people do things that everybody knows? And even that person who's doing it knows this is not going to be helpful in the long run because it's easier to deal with. It gives them some control over what's going on and it distracts from having to feel with that emotional pain. And where's the emotional pain coming from? That's where we get to the depression. That's where the 15 things are all lined up. 15 things are all giving us this little bit of anxiety, this little bit of depression, this little bit of pain, 15 times. And so we find ways to deal with it. So this can lead to things like suicide. This can lead to things like wanting to die. This can lead to what's called passive suicidal ideation, where I don't want to kill myself, I just don't want to be alive anymore. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I just kind of want to go away. I just want to disappear. I just don't want to have to deal with this anymore. And that's a very common thing. In fact, what percentage of people do you think experience in their lifetime some form of suicidal thought, whether it's an active, I'm going to kill myself and this is how I'm going to do it, or I just wish I died and I didn't exist anymore?
80%.
80%, good guess, a little higher.
95.
95 is good guess, a little higher.
Really?
100% of people in their life will experience this at some point. The wish to just not have to deal with this anymore, the wish to just go away, maybe even just the plan of take my car and just go off the road.
So not 100% like want to die.
At some point, yeah.
But
At some point, yeah. I'm not saying 100% of people will carry it out, but 100% of people will experience that feeling at some point in their life. That is incredibly normal because we live in a very high stress situation. We live a high stress life. We live in a very unfriendly civilization, unfriendly society. If you don't know people, I mean, I'm sure everybody here has experienced being in a crowded room and feeling absolutely alone. That is an awful feeling, and that is very much where we get back to that depression. And we have the anxiety of speaking to somebody now, which is a very stressful thing for most people. I can get up in here and talk, but Elizabeth will be able to vouch for me, is that I'm a very shy person at heart. And if we were all sitting in a room and you all kind of know, everybody knows somebody here, I would be sitting in the corner by myself. I have a lot of anxiety in speaking directly to people one-to-one. I'm very shy like that. However, I like to speak in front of groups because I'm weird, because of, I don't know, all those other things. Anyway, so anxiety and depression play a lot into the suicide, and somebody who does commit suicide might not be showing all of those classic signs of what we see with depression, but we're probably going to see that they're very withdrawn. Probably going to see that they are not really communicating much. Or when we do ask them questions, they give kind of general or vague answers because, just don't want to deal with it anymore. And now suddenly they'll start feeling better, and they're talking more, and they're engaging more, and they're better, right? Why would somebody who might be the highest risk for suicide start being more friendly?
Because they're close to it?
Because they're close to it. They've made their decision. I'm done. I'm going to live out the rest of the month, and then I'm free, and I'm out. So I don't have to worry about this anymore. And so those are the people that we have to be very careful with and very cautious of, because they'll seem to be getting better. Some of the other common signs of suicide, giving property away, talking about feeling immense guilt, feeling like they're being a burden to other people, all of those things where this doesn't feel right, something feels very off. Those are usually signs to look for. Should you ask somebody about suicide if you're concerned? Yeah. If you don't ask, then they don't think that you care. You will never cause somebody to commit suicide by asking if they're suicidal. The people who are usually the closest to suicide, the people who are usually the most depressed, are the ones who are least likely to reach out. So I see every so often on Facebook, oh, if you're depressed, talk to me. I'll talk to you back. That's not how it works, because they want you to reach out to them. They feel like a burden to you, so they're never going to reach out. They're never going to bother you with their issues. So anxiety, depression, suicide, self-injurious behaviors. My 4 years in Fresno with the mental health clinic, we were a medication-free clinic. We did not encourage, we did not like medications. We wanted people to be as free from medications as possible. So most of our patients did not have any sort of long-term medications. They were not on antidepressants, not on anxiety medication. We like to kind of work with people. We like to work down into those issues. Now, if somebody did have mental health medications, if they were on antidepressants, we didn't ban them by any means. But my background, my training, and my experience with that is, if we can help you without medication, that's a bonus for us, because the science has shown, and the research has shown, that the medication can only be as effective as long as you take it. You stop taking it and those symptoms can come back, because ultimately a lot of what the medication is symptom management. It's about making sure that I don't feel depressed, but it's not really addressing those underlying issues of why I'm depressed. And that's where hopefully therapy can come in and kind of work with you in identifying those underlying issues to help deal with things. Because ultimately, if you are stressed, and if you are depressed, and if you are feeling anxious, honestly, question, if those issues were resolved, would you still feel like that?
No.
Probably not, right? So finding somebody to work with you to help you address those underlying issues so that they're no longer an issue. Now, does that mean you're going to be problem-free for the rest of your life? No, because there's always things that come up. But if you have better resources, you have better internal tools, you have better ways of managing this, then the next problem that comes up is going to be even easier to deal with. So, mental health does not equal, that's old-fashioned slang for prescription. So mental health treatment does not always mean medication. Just because I like fun facts. This symbol, everybody seen this symbol around?
RX.
The RX. You know this means prescription?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make any sense the way it's written? No, because it's actually not an RX. Fun fact of the
Is that
day.
P?
It's a P. It's for prescription. That's the old-fashioned side for it.
Oh, and the X is just like
It's just carried over.
touching it.
Because it also goes with symptoms, history, stuff like that, diagnosis. Anyway, fun fact of it.
Oh, that's what the DX means?
Can be diagnosis. Can be a few different things.
Even though it doesn't have an X in it.
History doesn't have an X. Symptoms doesn't have an X. Prescription doesn't.
Yeah.
It's just shorthand. We write a lot.
That sounds like a prescription.
Doesn't. All right. I'm doing okay on time?
You're doing fine.
All right. Am I talking too fast? I tend to go fast to get excited with these things. Why do people go to mental health services? So I brought this. It's my No Problema book, which is also covered in stickers. Anyway, No Problema book is a personal journal that I keep after every patient I've ever seen for the last almost 2 years. So there's a bookmark in here. So I want you to just pick a page somewhere in there. That page. All right. All right. So why did somebody come into therapy in May? Recognizing fear is a primary motivator in avoiding people. We spent an entire session talking about how somebody was afraid to go talk to people. That was why we had a whole session.
Interesting.
Preparing for a busy month of work with son's criminal court case heard soon. That was an entire session of somebody I saw in therapy. Sick again, working to get life ready for return of daughter with child custody hearing approaching. That was one whole session. It was a 15-minute session. Mentally preparing for dating. That was a session of therapy with somebody. Doctor continues to lag at getting patients to neurologists for seizures. That was a session that I saw somebody for. Interesting. So why do people go to mental health services?
Lots of different things.
Lots of different reasons. Whatever reason you want to. There's this stigma and this belief, I think, and I see this so often, is why do people go to mental health services? Why does somebody go see a shrink? It's because, oh, you must have mental problems. Oh, you must have a mental disorder. You have a diagnosis. I see people all the time. I saw somebody because their life completely changed. They got a new job, their dad died, strained with the relationship, and they came in for a couple sessions. They came in for 2 or 3. They just needed somebody to talk to kind of work through these things, and then they were done.
Yeah.
So people can come in for all sorts of reasons, and I've had people leave for all sorts of reasons. They're done. They don't feel like they want to go anymore. I worked with one kid for 3 years. Came in after he got kicked out of school for drinking in middle school. I worked with him for 3 years, off and on. So why do people go to mental health services? It's for all sorts of reasons. It's somebody to talk to. And you know, I used to teach an intro to psych class, and one of the things I'd like to talk about with mental health services is that it's somebody you can talk to who can't tell anybody else anything. Now, I don't know about any of you, but I'm going to assume most people in the world do not have a friend who will not tell anybody anything, who will listen wholly to you for an hour without interrupting you, and who can provide advice based on their experiences with other people. I don't think most people have that, and that's a shrink's job. Are all shrinks going to do that? No. Some of them will talk about how great they are and how wonderful they are and how lucky you are to talk to them. Those are terrible, terrible shrinks, and you should not work with them. Go to the next person. Because they do exist, and I've worked with a lot of people who have said, you know, you're the first person who's really listened, or the last person I talked to talked about themselves for an hour. That happens. I mean, every field has good and bad people in it. Finding somebody that you can talk to, and finding, even if it's just for a single issue. I'm feeling anxious because school's starting soon, or I need to apply for this job and I don't feel good about it. Going in for that reason and just talking about that particular thing. And then once that is passed, or once that feels resolved, you know, moving on to something else, or coming back at a later point. You know, you don't have to go forever. You don't have to go once a week or however often. It's up to you, because it's your time. The other fun things that people would talk about is, oh, I'm afraid I don't want to be seen as crazy. The bar for crazy is set so high, you will never, ever make it unless you really, really try. I have heard some things that will absolutely terrify you in terms of how people have been treated, in terms of what people have done. Things that people are very ashamed of and wouldn't tell anybody else. This is somebody who is now contractually and legally obligated to keep your secrets. They cannot tell anybody. Now, I told you a couple of things that we talked about. However, if I took 10 people that I've talked to in the past, could you identify any of those people?
No.
Did I give you anything identifiable about anyone? I didn't tell you gender, I didn't tell you where they work, I didn't tell you their age. So, having somebody to talk to who is completely separate from everything, they're completely free of all the politics and all the games and all of the other issues that come with having friends and all of the complications and who this might go to. This is somebody completely separate from all of that, who you can talk to and tell anything to. And unless it meets a handful of California required criteria, you know, if you're gonna hurt yourself, we're required by law to tell people. If you know somebody who's getting abused, we're required by law to tell people. Other than these very small things, it's your time to talk about whatever you want, and then you can walk away. You can process that with somebody for as much as you want and then leave, because it's your time. Anybody have any questions? I feel like I'm kind of rambling at this point. Any thoughts? Nothing else? I guess that's all I have.
It's pretty thorough.
Okay.
I like that.
Thank
I haven't gone in a long time though. This is gonna make me want to go back.
Good. Yeah, that's good. That's good therapists, and I actually have a coworker right now who runs a lot of therapy online. So I don't know, kind of insurance-wise and all that stuff makes it complicated, but there's a lot of like text therapy. There's a lot of Skype therapy. There's a lot of different ways to access it if you know transportation is an issue, or if you know you just don't want to go deal with somebody new at the county or something. I don't. All of you need to know your kind of situations, but there are a lot of different avenues to find people. Schools too, if you're at any of the city colleges or state colleges, they offer like 6 free sessions every semester. So.
Your case managers have information on the apps that are for mental health.
That's all I got.
Thank you for coming in. Thank you.